A blast ripped through the repulsor lift generators of a landing pad, sending a shower of shrapnel high into the sky. The landing pad listed, ruined end tipping downward, sending a starship and a few unfortunate pedestrians sliding off the edge, plummeting down into the smothering darkness of an urban canyon, its sides sheer and immeasurably tall. A few people managed to cling to the pad, desperate to avoid the long fall, but then the remaining repulsor lifts gave out and the landing pad plunged into the depths, taking the remaining survivors with it. A clone trooper on a nearby balcony stood rooted to the spot, eyes fixed on the abyss below, before he was snapped out of his trance by another blast, further away this time, which shredded the top of a nearby skyscraper. Even as he turned away and headed back inside, the trooper's heart remained lodged in his throat, slow to forget the sight of Coruscant under siege. Hello and welcome back to our latest series. Today, we're going to be looking at another of the bloodiest battles in the history of the Star Wars galaxy, looking for insights into the soldiers who fought and died in them with the goal of understanding the worst day of these beings' lives, and in many cases, the last day of these beings' lives. In this video, we're going to be revisiting the greatest battle of the Clone Wars, a dramatic climax that took place above the galactic capital itself, the Battle of Coruscant. By 19 BBY, the Clone Wars had been raging for 3 years, and contrary to popular perception, the Republic was actually winning. It was 6 months into the Outer Rim sieges, in which the Republic had driven the CIS back to a scattering of strongholds on the fringe of the galaxy. The Jedi Council believed victory was near, but the Outer Rim sieges were just a diversion, a trap meant to bog the Jedi down while the Sith commenced their final operation. Even as Supreme Chancellor Palpatine diverted the bulk of Coruscant's defense fleet to assist in the Outer Rim sieges, led by the Jedi Order's best and brightest, General Grievous was amassing a vast armada at Yagdul, which contained a sixth of the CIS Navy's entire remaining ships. When Darth Sidious gave the order, Grievous led this fleet through the deep core to attack Coruscant. Even with much of the Coruscant home fleet off in the Outer Rim, Coruscant was scarcely undefended, but Grievous was able to get the drop on the home fleet, jumping his armada in right on top of them and opening fire before the Republic ships had time to raise their shields. A large portion of the fleet was destroyed outright, but over 1,000 capital ships survived this first assault, and a chaotic naval battle began. While his fleet engaged what remained of Republic forces, Grievous deployed a communications jammer to cut off calls for Republic reinforcements and ordered his ships to begin attacking targets of opportunity, firing on orbital mirrors, space stations, and even random targets on the surface. The aim was to make the offensive look desperate and uncoordinated, a distraction from the general's true aim. With the naval battle underway, Grievous then ordered his fleet to deploy its ground forces to Galactic City. A vast horde of hundreds of millions of battle droids descended, while clouds of Separatist fighter craft blotted out the sun. Separatist sympathizers on Coruscant's lower levels rose up, straining the planet's local police and military garrisons to their limit. All the while, Republic forces stationed on the planet's surface, led by the Coruscant Guard and the few remaining Jedi, scrambled to repulse the invading battle droids, which spread out all across the city. Like Grievous's space forces, the Separatists' ground forces seemed disorganized, firing on random civilian targets, from skyscrapers to commuter trains. The Republic defenders were spread thin across Coruscant, desperately trying to defend the city from the remorseless droid assault. The skies above Coruscant swarmed with spacecraft as vast clouds of dagger-winged vulture droids and squadrons of Titanic landing ships descended on Galactic City. The fighters flitted angrily between skyscrapers, spitting red plasma at anything in their path, blasting holes in airspeeders, military craft and buildings alike, unconcerned with civilian casualties or collateral damage. In the midst of it all, the landing craft continued their slow descent, eclipsing out the light from Coruscant's distant sun as they bore on the city, their holds packed with innumerable machines, all designed for war. A single clone trooper, his white armor bearing the proud red stripes of a Coruscant shock trooper, rushed out to one of the Senate building's innumerable balconies, where he stopped dead in his tracks, stricken by the sight of the incoming invasion force. Even as he did, a single vulture droid plunged from the sky, its engines screaming as they dragged the craft far past the speed of sound, falling like a meteor into one of Coruscant's urban canyons. It caught the sight of one of the city's many floating landing platforms, on which a few dozen civilians of various species were scrambling aboard an evac craft, and changed course, hurling itself into the side of the platform. A fireball consumed the portside repulsor lifts, spraying shrapnel into the crowd of civilians and causing the platform to list. The landed spacecraft and many of the civilians toppled off the edge, plummeting into the abyss below. Before long, the platform's remaining repulsor lifts gave out, and the whole thing fell, dragging the remaining civilians with it. Another blast sounded in the distance as a vulture droid steered itself into the top of a skyscraper, shaking the trooper out of his trance. Over comms, his commander was frantically giving orders to all available units, trying to direct a few hundred men in dealing with the few thousand crises that were springing up all across the Senate district. The trooper turned and raced back inside, joining a handful of clones and Senate guards as they made their way to the Grand Concourse. Once the troopers reached the concourse, the group came to a halt. The sound of metal striking metal echoed from around the corner of the Great Corridor, and the troopers raised their blasters. No sooner did a squad of B-1 battle droids come around the corner than they were shredded by a salvo of blue plasma bolts. What remained of the droids was scattered across the hallway, smoking, but even as the droids were dispatched, another hurtled around the corner, a spinning wheel of bronzium plating and durasteel. Even as the smoke began to clear, the new arrival came to a stop and uncurled, flipping out blaster cannons and preparing to fire. The clones fired again, but their bolts spattered harmlessly against the bubble of blue energy that now surrounded the remorseless destroyer droid. As a new wave of droids arrived on the scene, the droideka returned fire, its blazing red blaster bolts tearing through armor and flesh, burning away the life from the assembled troopers. For days, Grievous's assault seemed to be totally disorganized, a desperate last act of revenge against the Republic. The battle lasted for a week, and after the initial confusion, the Jedi and their clones managed to rally and repulse the invading droid army from most key targets. Separatist ground forces retreated, but as the Jedi realized, much too late, the whole ground invasion was yet another diversion. Grievous used the chaos as cover to kidnap Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, sprinting him away to the Invisible Hand. The Jedi Council's initial rescue attempts failed, and they ultimately decided to call in two of the Order's greatest heroes, Kenobi and Skywalker. The two Jedi returned to Coruscant with the Open Circle Armada, led by the Star Destroyer Rotimundi. They arrived at the head of a fleet of Republic naval reinforcements, some speeding back from the Outer Rim sieges, and others deployed from Palpatine's secret shipyards, which cornered the Separatist fleet in Coruscant's upper atmosphere, preventing Grievous from escaping with the captive Chancellor. From there, the battle turned against the Confederacy. After a straight week of fighting without reinforcements, losses were beginning to mount, and before long, Kenobi and Skywalker, with the help of Flight Squad 7, were able to board the Invisible Hand and rescue the Supreme Chancellor, with Skywalker killing Count Dooku himself during the rescue attempt. Not long after this, the Invisible Hand suffered extensive damage in a battle with the Star Destroyer Gualara, and it slowly began to break apart. Grievous ultimately chose to abandon ship, fleeing to a nearby battleship and ordering what was left of his fleet to withdraw, leaving Palpatine and the Jedi aboard his crumbling flagship as it fell into Coruscant's gravity well. But against all odds, Anakin Skywalker was able to land the wreck of the Invisible Hand safely, and the Supreme Chancellor was saved. The Battle of Coruscant ultimately ended in a Republic victory, if one that left billions dead and much of Galactic City in ruins. The CIS, meanwhile, never recovered from the losses it suffered at Coruscant. Just a few days later, it would lose the Clone Wars entirely. That does it for this video. But what do you think? What do you think of the series so far? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next installment of the series.